We're about to begin the service for Mrs. Marian Ross. For those of you who have cell phones, I'd ask you to please turn them to the off position. Officiating our service today will be Rabbi Meir Hecht.
Michtam LeDavid Shamreni Eleki Chasi Sivach Amart Ladinoi Adinoi Ata Toivosi Baal Alecha Liktoish Asher Baretz Eima Ve'adir Kol Cheftiva Mirbo Atzvoi Samachir Maru Balasich Niskeyam Imidom Val Esa Esa Shmois Amal Sifasoi Adinoi Minas Chelki V'choisi Ato Taimich Geroli Chavol Im Naflu Libanim Im Afnach Los Shofra Loi Avorech Es Adinoi Asher Yatzoni Af Leilois Yisru Nichu Yoiso Yishivisi Adinoi L'negdi samid ki mimini bal emoit lochein samach libi vayogel kivaydi af besari yishkoin lo netzach ki leisazev nafshi lishoy lo leisit in chasid chalireis shochas teidieni eirachachayim sevas machis espanecha ni imois Bimin Chanetzach, chapter 16 of Psalms from King David. A michtam by David, watch over me, O God, for I have put my trust in you. You, my soul, have said to God, you are my master. You are not obligated to benefit me, for the sake of the holy ones who lie in the earth, and for the mighty. All my desires are fulfilled in their merit. Those who hasten after other gods, their sorrows shall increase. I will not offer the libations of blood, nor take their names upon my lips. The Lord is my allotted portion and my share. You guide my destiny. Portions have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, a beautiful inheritance is mine. I bless the Lord, who has advised me. Even in the nights my intellect admonishes me. I have set the Lord before me at all times, because he is at my right hand. I shall not falter. Therefore my heart rejoices, and my soul exults. My flesh too rests secure. For you will not abandon my soul to the grave. You will not allow your pious one to see purgatory. Make known to me the path of life, that I may be satiated with the joy of your presence, with the bliss of your right hand forever. Chapter 91 of Psalms. I'm going to read it in Hebrew, followed by the English. Yoishev b'seiser elyoin, b'tzeil shad ha'yisloino, noi mar aladino, imachsim tzedasi, Eloi ha'yevtach boi, ki hu yatzilcha mipach yakush, midever avois, bevras ha'yasach loch, V'sach askenaf av techset sino v'seicheira mita ilay sira mipachad loyla mechet yof yoyma mimidever boifel yalech mikadev yoshod tzahara mipom tzitchelef urevova miminecha ilecha lo yigash rak benecha sabit Mishilu masrishoim tirek yato adinoi machsi el yoin samta meinecha loisunei lechara v'negal yikrav ba'alecha kimalocha vitzavelach lishmorcha b'chol drachecha al kapayim yisuncha pentigoif bo'even raglecha al shacha v'fesen tidroich Tir mais kefir visanin kivicha shakvavateo asakveu kiadashmi ikreini veneu imayanoichi vitzara achatzeu vachabdeu erechiam maspiyeu vareu bishuasi. You who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, who abides in the shadow of the Omnipotent. of the Omnipotent. I say to you of the Lord, who is my refuge and my stronghold, my God in whom I trust, that he will save you from the ensnaring trap, from the destructive pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and you will find refuge under his wings. His truth is a shield and an armor. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, the pestilence that prowls in the darkness, nor the destruction that ravages at noon. 1,000 may fall at your left side and 10,000 at your right, but it shall not reach you. You need only look with your eyes, and you will see the retribution of the wicked, because you have said, the Lord is my shelter, and you have made the Most High your haven. No evil will befall you. No plague will come near your tent, for he will instruct his angels in your behalf to guard you in all your ways. They will carry you in their hands, lest you hurt your foot on a rock. You will tread upon the lion and the viper. You will trample upon the young lion and the serpent. Because he desires me, I will deliver him. I will fortify him, for he knows my name. When he calls on me, I will answer him. I am with him in distress. I will deliver him and honor him. I will satisfy him with long life and show my deliverance. And finally, please join me for Psalm 23. Psalm chapter 23, which I believe is in the booklet that they gave out. I don't have a copy of it. We'll read it first together in English in the booklet, top of the page. Please join and read it together with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of the righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I'll now say that in Hebrew. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo yachsar, b'noi steshe yarbitzeni, al mei minucha yisina haleni. Nafshi yishoivev yancheni v'magle tzedek l'ma'an shemoi. Gam ki elech begeitz al maves, lo irara ki ato imadi, shivtecham shantecha, hey ma yinachamuni, tarech lefonai shulchan neged etzoiri roi, di shanta vashemen roi shikoi sirvoya, ach toi v'vaches irdir defuni kol yimei chayoi, v'shavti b'veis Adonai li'orech yamim. Good morning, friends. We are here today, gathered together to mourn and to celebrate the life of Marian Ross, of blessed memory. Although I never had the good fortune of meeting Marian personally, her family, some who I've known for many, many years, is testament to the great person she most certainly was, and the incredible life of faith, purpose, and commitment that she lived. I sat with Benita, Curtis, and Lynn a few days ago, and they shared with me a bit about their mom, who was an obviously incredible woman. Marian was born on July 1st, 1927 in St. Louis. That's 95 years ago. What a special woman, lived such a long life. She grew up in Chester, Illinois, and later in Carbondale, where she raised her two beautiful children, Benita and Curtis, together with her late husband, Bernard Beryl Ross, of blessed memory. Marian loved shopping. She loved going to restaurants. She loved landscaping, taking care of her landscaping. And of course, she loved her dogs, those beautiful Dobermans. She had a special obsession with the outdoors. She would even take the Doberman dogs with her on excursions on their little family boat. But of course, most of all, Marian was a Yiddish mama, a Jewish mother. She loved her children, Benita, Curtis, and later Lynn when she joined the family. Family get-togethers were her favorite. She always loved being together with her children. She wasn't the most social person that I've heard, so big gatherings wasn't necessarily her thing, but her kids, they were always her priority and everything to her. Marian cared deeply about her Jewish roots and her connection to the Jewish people. They were founding members of Temple Beth Jacob in Carbondale. And of course, Marian was an active member, a very active member of the Shul Sisterhood. When she later moved to Northbrook, she made sure to become a member at their local shul. In fact, one of her first stops upon moving to Chicago area was to go and visit Hamakor Gallery, the Judaica store that used to be in Skokie on Dempster. And she made sure to purchase a mezuzah, kosher mezuzah, for her new home in Northbrook. I had the good fortune of meeting Curtis for the first time at a lecture event that I coordinated for the Jewish Learning Institute, together with the Jewish Judges Association of Illinois, about 15 years ago at the ISBA, the Illinois State Bar Association. And after the lecture, I get into conversation with this man in the back, introduces himself as Curtis Ross, and I offered him to put on the tefillin, which he readily agreed, happily proceeded to put on tefillin together with me and to recite the Shema. And then he began telling me a little bit about his past and about this Chabad rabbi by the name of Rabbi Heber from St. Louis, who used to come and study with him and his sister down in Carbondale when they were children. His mom and dad hired this rabbi to come from St. Louis to come and study with them. He would travel regularly all the way from St. Louis to Carbondale. And that was their Hebrew school because it was so important to mom that her children get a Jewish education. And she was going to do whatever it takes to make that happen, even to bring a rabbi from another city. In fact, that conversation was eye-popping for me because, this was like only a moment that God could have orchestrated. My father had the very same experience as Curtis and Benita. He grew up in Cape, not the time to talk about him. He grew up in Cape Girardeau, and the same Rabbi Heber would come down to Cape Girardeau to teach my father for his bar mitzvah, and he came as well, probably the same time. Maybe he was making the trips. And that was a really special moment that we got to share, and that's all, of course, in honor of your mom and dad, who made Jewish education, Hebrew education, such an important priority for you and for each of you. And her memory, her commitment to the Jewish people is seen so strongly and so powerfully through this anecdote, and through the message that she was trying to impart, most certainly, for both you, Curtis, and Benita, and Lynn, when you joined the family, of how important it is to her that the Jewish tradition and Jewish spirit live on. This was Marian Ross. She wasn't going to let her children live in a place with no Jewish education. She wasn't going to live in a home without a kosher mezuzah. Whatever it takes, she was going to make it happen. That's quite incredible. And it's clear to me as well, from the many years I got to spend many conversations with Curtis, it's clear to me that she succeeded in perpetuating her values and morals, her moral compass, in such a strong way to her children. King Solomon wrote in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, V'hachai yitain el libo, he wrote, which means the living shall take to heart. When someone passes on, it is incumbent upon us to learn from their life how we can strengthen and better our moral compass and our life, what we can do to live as better Jews, to live as better friends, to be a better parent, a better child, better sibling, how we can be a better human being and contribute to society and contribute to the continuity of the Jewish people. And when we participate in a funeral, we have to take in those lessons and make them real for us. Sometimes when we hear about how the person who passed on lived their life, of course, it's a time to talk about the special and good deeds that they did. We open our eyes to see the world a little bit differently. And as a result, we have the opportunity to make the continuation of their life through us. What their life was about, each and every one of us here, especially the children, Marian's children, have the opportunity to say, she will continue to live on through me, through my deeds, through my actions, through my decision to live a life of ethics, morals, and commitment to our people. In closing, I would like to ask that in Marian's merit, all of us here should confront what life is truly about, what really matters, open our eyes, and increase our dedication to goodness and kindness. And through that, we will continue Marian's legacy. Friends, tonight will be Shabbat. It's Friday. Shabbat begins in only a few hours. I would like to ask that each of you do something special on Shabbat. Making the Kiddush, eating the challah, whatever it may be, something special on Shabbat to honor the legacy and memory of Marian Ross. And for the Jewish women here in the room, tonight at 4:41 p.m. will be candle lighting. Please make that effort to find the candle and light it, and make the blessing, and use the opportunity to bring more light to the world and to usher in the Shabbat, a day of peace, a day of comfort, and a day of healing in memory of Marian's soul. Lynn and Curtis will each share a few words.
Well, mother-in-law jokes are everywhere, and many daughter-in-laws marry into a long, rocky road. That couldn't be further from my experience with my mother-in-law, Marian Ross. Excuse me. She loved me and welcomed me warmly from the very start. She always wanted the best for me and was always trying, in her words, to jap me up with lovely gifts. From the beginning, we seemed to have a certain connection, And when Curtis learned that our birthdays were a mere day apart, it kind of startled him. It truly gave him pause. True enough to our astrological sign, my mother-in-law and I shared many similarities. For instance, we both loved nature and design. She knew the names of all the plants, something I had to take a college course to learn. I always felt that had Marian known about the landscape industry in her youth, it might have changed the course of her life. We both loved fashion and shopping and shared preferences for the same foods. We both viewed social situations with anxiety and also shared a certain sensibility about the proper way to do things. There were times when neither Benita nor Curtis knew what she wanted, but I knew. However, there was a time, just one time, when I nearly incurred her wrath, which, by all accounts, was substantial. We were sitting at opposite ends of a large oval table at the Whitehall Nursing Home. A lot of people were there. Curtis and I had just returned from our honeymoon, and Marian broached the topic of my married name. You're going to change your last name to Ross, aren't you? From the other side of the table, I tossed my head to one side and said, well, I haven't decided. What? What? She rose sharply to her feet and glowered at me with a fierce look, with a fierce look as I have seen. Well, I guess it's decided then, I said softly. And that was it. She sat back down, and she never directed another crossword at me, ever. From there, it was a long, tough road for Marian. Debilitation kept creeping in, slow but steady. It was remarkable how she accepted it, not with bitterness, but with increasing love for Benita, Curtis, and myself. I look around, and I know that my life has been filled with blessings. I'm grateful for being blessed with having a truly loving mother-in-law. Thank you, and God bless you, Marian.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Hecht. Oh, excuse me. Thank you to all who came out in these difficult times to give support to me and my family. One thing, my mother she was quite a character, and anybody here who knew her never knew exactly what to expect, good or bad. She was only 5'1", but it could be pretty intimidating if you got on her wrong side. But if you were on her good side like Lynn, I wish I knew what Lynn did that my mother always loved her, although I did have to prepare her for certain things before the two of them met. In preparing for today, I was thinking of some stories, and as was Lynn, and it was like, well, I can't tell that one, and I can't tell that one, and that wouldn't be appropriate for her funeral. So that got rid of most of the good stories. So anyway, my mother was a small town girl always. Her parents her father came from Russia with nothing. Eventually became an expert tailor, married my grandmother who had come from Krakow, Poland. And eventually they bought a small women's clothing store in Chester, Illinois, much as with my father's family. My mother had an older sister, Bunny, and a younger brother, Bud, who each predeceased her by many years, and I can't tell any of those stories. After high school, her parents sent her to the University of Miami, where she only stayed for a couple of months and went back to Chester. If anybody's been to Chester, they would be as confused as I am as to who would move from Miami to Chester, but she decided to do that, and it was pretty obviously that her parents had sent her to the University of Miami to find a husband because she wasn't really that interested in the school part of it for herself. My other grandparents, Sal Ross, who many of you here knew, had come from what was then Russia, and he eventually met up with his older brother Sam. He learned how to make clothes while living in St. Louis, and eventually he and Sam bought a women's clothing store in Murfreesboro and later Carbondale. Both sets of grandparents knew each other. They were in the same business and came from similar places and had similar backgrounds. Coincidentally, Rabbi Heck's family also had women's clothing stores because I remember their commercials growing up from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. My father was a CPA. He grew up in Murfreesboro, eventually moved to Chicago and then to St. Louis. And my grandparents were looking for a way to get him to move back to Southern Illinois. In particular, I think it was my grandmother, Anna Ross, who was really pushing. And for those who knew Anna, you knew that once she had something in her target that, she would not give up easily, much like my mother. Anyway, they found an older CPA by the name of Harry Curtis, and it helped him go into partnership at the CPA firm of Curtis and Ross, which might sound a little familiar to some of you. Eventually, they couldn't just get him a place, for his business. They also had to find a wife for him. And I always said that my mother and father were the only two Jews of that age left in Southern Illinois, so it was an easy fix-up. So they got married, they bought a small home in Carbondale. 3 years later, I was born. My mother looked through a book of names, and she says, "Oh, Michael Ross, that sounds like a pretty good name," or David Ross, that sounds like a pretty good name. And she got to Curtis, and she says, "Oh, that sounds great." And my father had to tell her why it sounded so familiar, because she hadn't thought that it's because it was the name of her husband's CPA firm. So I became the only person in the history of the world to be indirectly named after a CPA firm. And yet my mother didn't find that to be strange at all. So I certainly still do. After I was born, they got right back to business. I always said they must have really liked me, and went right back to business. In 10 months, 3 weeks later, my sister Benita was born. But that wasn't enough for my parents for some reason. At the same time my sister and I were infants, my father decided it would be a great time to breed our Doberman Pinscher, Carrie, and they kept her and 3 Doberman Pinschers, her puppies. So now my mother had her family. My father, Bernard, my sister, Benita, me, and her 4 Doberman Pinschers. It was then time to get a bigger home, and they found a place out in rural Route 4 outside of Carbondale. I know you all look at me and say, well, he's very sophisticated. How could he have possibly grown up in rural Route 4 in Southern Illinois? But that's the way it was. My mother loved that home, and she learned that she was a natural landscaper, as Lynn said. I had no interest because every time she wanted to plant something, she would ask me to go dig holes for her, and that wasn't something that I enjoyed, but she loved it. She had a great knowledge of trees and plants and flowers. She spent many years working in her yard and making it beautiful, and I could still visualize her cutting grass on our Gravely tractor as she's driving around on that thing. My mother was extremely protective of her kids, and I do mean extremely protective, but sometimes she had unique ways of showing it. I don't remember this personally, but we certainly heard the stories that when Benita and I were very, very young, my mother got a used car, and she wasn't going to have her children in some dirty used car. So she wanted to make it safe for us. So she took a hose and washed out the inside of that car that she had gotten. And as a result of that, the neighbors called my father and said, you need to know what your wife is doing now. She's hosing out your new car. Our family was the center of my mother's universe. She loved us even when she would argue with us, which happened not infrequently. I'm sure everyone in the family knows some of those stories. One thing I can tell you is she never argued with the Dobermans. So they were always on her good side. My mother wasn't educated, but she always expected my sister and me to become well educated. There was never a time where I didn't just assume that I was going to get a good education. Shortly after we were born, my parents signed my sister and me up to go to the university school so that we would get off to a good start. And she drove us back and forth every day for many years. My parents didn't have any religious training, but as Rabbi Heck said, my mother had a very strong feeling for her religion, and she got Rabbi Heber. And it was just another example of her expecting me to be more educated and not to be limited anyway because she had no Jewish education herself. And as my family knows, there weren't a lot of people in my family who had a lot of education. So I can say that Rabbi Heber, who was a great rabbi who prepared me for my bar mitzvah, was certainly more successful in training Rabbi Heck's father than in training me or my cousin David Appleton, who has not quite made it to the standards of the Heck family. I grew up being asked whether I was going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a CPA, which were the big three for Jewish boys. I got 2 out of 3. Benita got an undergraduate degree from Illinois and a master's degree from Wisconsin. My parents' expectations led to our educational achievements. And my mother was very proud of what we did educationally. She was very supportive of that. And so I'll always be grateful for her for all the support and guidance she gave in that way. My mother was happy in Southern Illinois, where she basically lived her whole life. But my father, at a certain point, became a partner at Touche Ross, which is now Deloitte, except there was one thing. He was going to be moving to Chicago, and my mother was horrified at the thought of moving to Chicago and moving away from her house and her yard and the people she knew and the sisterhood and everything that she knew was Southern Illinois. And she and my father and my sister went looking for places to live in Chicago, and she was so extraordinarily upset that they took her to lunch at Hamburger Hamlet, and even the waiter had to comfort her because she was crying and upset, and she couldn't see how it would possibly work out moving to Chicago. But eventually they found a place in Northbrook at Mission Hills. And my mother grew to love Mission Hills and even called it her little fairyland. She lived there for over 40 years with my sister and my father until he got sick, and ended up being very happy about her move. When my father got sick with cancer, my mother and sister took care of him for over 5 years, and he was really the center of their universe. And were very dedicated to him, even though she often didn't agree with him in fairly interesting ways. After he died, Benita took care of my mother for many years and eventually dedicated herself to my mother 365 days a year. My mother was lost without my father and depended tremendously on Benita, and Benita stepped up completely and took care of her. You know, Lynn talked about how she and my mother got along. It was something that we didn't know what to expect. But when she met Lynn, almost immediately she took to her. There was a connection there. She finally had somebody she could talk to about landscaping and plants, certainly not me. She loved Lynn very much. And as Lynn said, they had many qualities and interests together and in common. And she couldn't wait to give Lynn jewelry and clothes and that sort of thing. As my mother got older and sicker, an interesting thing happened. She became nicer and nicer and nicer and more appreciative of everything and everybody who helped her, which had not been the case so much in her younger years. She and Benita became best friends. As Benita said, at some point she became a sweet old lady, which was not something that we had expected. She appreciated her life even as she became sicker and sicker, and she fought to stay alive when most others would have given up, and she lived for many years under difficult conditions and didn't complain about it, had an extremely positive attitude, and again was so thankful for Benita and everything she did, and she was thankful when Benita brought her friends over to talk to her and be her friends because she was bedridden for many years and couldn't do anything. Benita also took extraordinary diligence in dealing with the numerous doctors, nurses, and other medical providers that became such a big part of my mother's life for the last number of years. And she made sure that my mother was taking care of you. So thank you, Benita, for all the sacrifices. You made to take care of our parents. My mother's favorite thing in recent years was when Lynn and I and Benita would all be around her, and she didn't talk much anymore, but she just loved having us all around her and talking and paying attention to her. And the number one thing that she always wanted to know is, when could we come and visit again? And today, we're all here to visit. May God bless the spirit and soul of my beloved mother, Marian Ross, and may her memory be a blessing for our family and for all who knew her. Thank you.
It's customary at a funeral to ask forgiveness from the deceased if, God forbid, we did anything to hurt them during their lifetime, anything that we may have done that was not appropriate in their treatment or anything else. And on behalf of the family and everyone who knew her, Marian, I'm asking forgiveness from you, and that there should be no grievances, and we are here to escort you to your final resting place. May you rest in peace. Please rise for the memorial prayer. Eilem Ali Rachamim Shechein Miroyimim Hametzei Minucha Nechoyena Ala Kanefei Ashechina Bimalo Yesakido Yeshimutairim Kizo Yarhorakiya Mazhirim Es Nishmas Marian Bat Morris J. Shalchal Yelo Ama Bavur Shenad Woodstock about Askoras Nishmasa Began Aiden Temenuchasa Lachein Balorachamim Yastira Visei Seknof of Lilamim Vitzrair Bitzrachayim Es Nishmasa Adinoyu Nachalasa Visanu Achal Mishkavo Bishalom Vinoamar Amen. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence among the holy and pure who shine as the brightest of the firmament, unto the soul of Marian, daughter of Morris J. Ross, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring her under the cover of thy wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may her repose be peace. Amen.
This concludes our service here in the chapel. The interment will take place at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery in Arlington Heights immediately following the service. There will be a virtual Shiva for the family from 12 noon on Sunday until 2 p.m. That information is located on the website for those of you who are online, and for those of you who are sitting here today, the information is on the folder. For those of you who will be joining the family in procession, please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker. It goes on the front passenger side windshield. And please drive with your bright headlights and your hazard lights on. Please avoid any large spaces or gaps. We drive in procession, particularly at the intersections. And let everyone know that we're going to lower the casket immediately as soon as we get to the service out of respect for the cold outside. I'm going to ask everyone to please rise as the deceased family and rabbi are escorted from the chapel.